Hello, and welcome to a very special podcast. Today we are talking about the latest two Star Wars movies, and depending on who you ask, the worst two Star Wars movies, Solo and Rise of Skywalker. I am your host. I have no people. I am alone. I am mediocrity Solo.
And I am currently mourning the passing of Dragon Ball Z Abridged. Actually, I've been binging that these last couple of days.
Oh yeah, that's rough.
Definitely sad to see them go, but I totally understand like why they came to that decision, and I do think it probably was like a good stopping point for them. So yeah, and I look forward to seeing what else they do in the future. But yeah, rest in peace,
Yeah.
Dragon Ball Z Abridged. I
And
am Robert.
and,
Sorry.
and I am currently carbo loading on sunships for a 5 mile run I got to do tomorrow morning, and being otherwise a serious pod racer in my off time with my 2014 Dodge Dart painted black with orange racing stripes. I am Arc Bumpy Coupe.
Yes.
That is a deep cut reference right there.
Yeah,
So
if you get it, you'll get bonus points at the end of the cast.
yeah, let us know like what was that character's real name and what his profession was, and I'll give your comment a heart. So we're gonna talk about Solo first because we're gonna go chronologically. Solo came out in it was 2018, right? In May 2018 when that movie came out.
Yeah, a while ago.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we will talk about Rise of Skywalker in the back half of this podcast. I know that's probably the more interesting film. Although, honestly, with the production issues and stuff, I'm actually more interested to talk about Solo. Because
Yeah, no,
this movie had some problems before it was even out.
Yeah.
I vaguely recall it, but can you give us like the rundown so we can?
So, on top of being the second Star Wars like story spin-off thing after Rogue One, and just general audiences not having ever been demanding of a Solo movie. Like I remember when they first announced Rogue One back in like 2014, 2015, there was a lot of like hype around the possibilities of these spin-off stories, and there were people that wanted a Boba Fett movie, a Kenobi movie, Darth Maul, uh, Old Republic stuff, Darth Bane. There were all these like ideas, and then they went with Solo, which was one that wasn't that I don't recall really being in the conversation. It wasn't one that I recall anyone ever being like interested in, and that reflected in this movie's box office. It was a box office disaster as far as Star Wars goes.
Yeah.
It I think it did end up technically making its money back and making like enough to break even, but this
They made
isn't
$393 million out of the $300 million budget. So
Yeah.
it barely made money back.
And this isn't some like dusty old IP like Flash Gordon or I'ma say it, Dune. I'm excited for the Dune movie, but I'm a little on whether it's gonna be successful. Just because it is kind of it is old and it does have this reputation of being like too much for film.
Okay, like to be, if we want to go off on a slight tangent here, as far as concerned, the first Dune book probably needs to be made into at least 3 movies because it's got 3 parts to it,
Yeah.
and like, and also. I kind of don't want him to fucking dig up Frank Herbert's grave. His own son did that with the last 2 books in the main series, and also they're fucking, yeah, fuck you, fucking son of Frank Herbert. If you're out there listening, you're a fucking piece of shit, and I hate what you did. But yeah, the there's like the, the, that's like a sort of a different thing, and I'd prefer if they just let the books remain the books at this point.
Yeah. Well, my point was that this is Star Wars. This is the spearhead of the sci-fi fantasy genre. This is the big blockbuster franchise of all time. This should be, this should be like 500 to a billion, 500 million to $1 billion guaranteed in the box office, not 300, not barely scraping by. But then you had some other problems like the directors who I don't remember their first names. So it's Lord and Miller. It's the same team behind the Lego Movie and the 21 Jump Street reboots. Were originally slated
Yeah.
to write and direct this, and they had a fallout with Lucasfilm head Kathleen Kennedy, who tries so hard to be Kevin Feige, but is just not Kevin Feige. So they left, and she got Ron Howard to
Yeah.
do all the reshoots and finish up the movie, and he apparently like had to do like something like 60% of it from scratch within a year.
Mm.
And I love Ron Howard. I think he's a fantastic director, and he's actually always been on my short list for Star Wars. He's got that history with George Lucas. He was in American Graffiti. He was a decent actor on TV back in the day, and he's directed some of my favorite movies of the last 20 years, like A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah.
And so he's always been on my short list for Star Wars directors, but I want him to actually have another chance at directing a Star Wars movie. I want him to be there from the
Yeah.
beginning and not like, oh my god, this whole production is failing, and I
Not
have to
be a
like, and I
backup.
and I have to like try to duct tape this together into something profitable.
He's also got a very different style from Lorne and Miller, and I'm not really sure why they decided to bring him on specifically to finish that up. Like,
Yeah,
They
um,
were just like, oh, it's Ron Howard. He can fix anything. It's like,
no,
eh,
no, you can't always fix anything. Being a
yeah.
ground radio repairman, I know that sometimes shit is so fucked up that you just have to float it to the fucking El Mako. You can't fucking always fix stuff.
Yeah.
so let's talk a bit about now that we kind of have some of the, and even outside the production, this was the follow up to The Last Jedi. And
Hmm.
it came out like 5 months after The Last Jedi, which was, love it or hate
Yeah.
it, you have to admit it was the most divisive Star Wars movie. And it
Oh, yeah.
desensitized a lot of people, even people who ended up, coming around to liking it or liked it at first and just kind of like grew to like it less like I did.
Yeah.
So
I,
this movie had a lot going against it, and it really shows in the response to this movie,
Yeah.
while also the movie just not being very good in its own right either.
Yeah. I will say this. So, confession here. I actually, like, I had no real interest in watching this movie. Like, I just watched it yesterday, basically for this podcast. And
ooh,
I will say this, I liked it more than I thought I would, but yeah, it's still not very good. And we'll
Oh yeah,
go
I
into that. But that was my experience with it, is like, just nobody liked it. Again, I wasn't particularly interested in it either. And like, I saw all the reviews, and there was just a bunch of like, a lot of, I think the worst thing about it is that there was just a lot of indifference to it, really, and indifference to most of the stuff that the movie was trying to do. And that's where it and that's just where I became indifferent to it. So
yeah.
yeah, that
well,
was
well,
my
I guess
experience.
I guess it's my confession time then. I'm the exact opposite. I saw it when it came out, and I did not bother rewatching it before we did this. So we're fucking.
Yeah.
I have now seen this movie 3 times. I saw it once in theaters, uh, not when it first
Yeah.
came out. It was several months after it had been out. I watched it on my birthday, which is in
Mhm.
August. Um, and it was at a
Yeah.
one of those dollar show theaters, just really cheap,
Mm,
dingy theaters. I went and saw it on my birthday because I was like, I hadn't seen it
Yeah.
yet. Whatever, nothing else was even remotely interesting to me.
Yeah.
And then I saw it once with my nieces on Disney Plus, and then I watched it again a couple days ago in preparation for this podcast.
Yeah. I I probably should have seen it more. I confess, like, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, there's no.
I've always been taught, like, when you're critiquing something, you should look over it a couple times, not just once. But oh well. We'll just go through this.
There's no should have. There ain't no rules here. We do what we do when we fucking.
Thanks. Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, I like that was yeah, and I think that's just the big thing is that there's just a lot of stuff in this movie that I just don't like care about. I don't care about the dice. I don't care how he got his gun. I don't care like
That
they think they're being clever with all these, by like throwing in all of these Easter eggs or all of these like clever nods, and none of them
Yeah.
are really all that interesting to me.
that really is the crux of the issue with this movie.
Yeah.
Now,
And I don't care about Beckett. I don't
um,
care about like Woody Harrelson's character. Woody
yeah,
Harrelson's a great actor, but I just don't care about his character. I don't care that
yeah.
he betrays them and that Han has to shoot him. I just don't care.
Like rewinding a couple years ago when we talked about The Last Jedi on a podcast, which if you haven't seen that yet, watch it, because I kind of said something very prophetic in that podcast. And this was right after the movie had come out. This was before like a lot of the backlash had really set in with it yet.
Yeah.
I talked about the unforgivable flaw with Last Jedi. Like, love it or hate it, you have to admit that the whole Canto Bight subplot was completely pointless. It didn't tie in with anybody's character arcs, and it is the one thing that even fans of the movie are going to come away not liking a whole lot.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I've actually extended that to every single scene with Rose Tico in it, but that is actually
Yeah,
one of my
no, I-
proudest moments on any of these podcasts.
Yeah.
It is kind of calling that, and so
And that also
obviously,
applies to a lot of stuff that we're going to be talking about with
Yeah.
Rise of Skywalker, by
Yeah.
the way. Which
yes,
I'll be talking about why Rise of Skywalker is even worse. But
yeah.
yeah, no, that's
So-
just the biggest problem is that all this stuff that we just don't care about.
So, obviously, it's been almost 2 years since Solo came out, so this isn't going to sound as prophetic, but I did say this after I watched it for the first time. And I think I mentioned it on the Discord when I first watched it, where I was like, this movie has two major unforgivable problems that even casual movie goers who don't think critically about what they watch are going to kind of pick up on. And one of them, Robert just touched on, which is the problem with doing a prequel like this. I did not like Rogue One. I made that very clear when we talked about that in Force Awakens in that podcast a few years ago. And I've made it clear on Twitter on an almost monthly basis ever since. But Rogue One felt like a story that even if it didn't need to be told, it was a story people were interested in. There were actual character arcs, kinda. I don't think they were well executed, but it tried to tell like an actual story. Solo, it's literally just how he got his gun, how he got his ship, how he got his jacket, how he got his name, which was so stupid. So stupid. Stupidest thing Star Wars. I think it's the stupidest thing Star Wars has ever done.
Yeah, I don't mind the story of how he got the ship or how he met Chewie. Like those were the parts of it that I was like, okay, I kind of like this. Those were the parts of it that made me say, okay, I'm liking this more than I thought I would. But yeah, I don't care about his mentor. I don't care how he got his gun. Like, I didn't even notice I don't know, maybe this is just I wasn't paying attention, but I didn't even notice the dice were a thing on the Millennium Falcon until this, and maybe that's just me not paying attention to detail. But
it had
just
never
part
been
of the ambiance. They're just there. They're a background detail that blends in, and you don't really have to think about it.
Yeah, they had never been called. Attention had never been called to them in any of these movies, until until Last Jedi actually,
Until
which
the Last
I
Jedi,
know
and it was
Last
yeah,
Jedi and Solo's production cycles overlapped a lot. Again, they only came out like a couple months apart. So
yeah,
I feel like that was something Rian Johnson did out of his own nonsense, and then Kathleen Kennedy was like, "Oh, we should probably like." Since we're doing a solo movie, we should probably like do something with that.
yeah,
Um, and it's just so silly. This is a very silly movie, and I think Star Wars has always been
yeah.
silly, and I've actually liked it a lot when it's silly. But this is kind
Too
of
much.
silly, and this is silly in a boring way. A lot of times, this is
Yeah,
silly like, oh,
it's
the fucking Fembot is banging Lando. Ooh, isn't that quirky?
yeah, like oh, Lando used to be in love with a female robot, and like I don't know, they have the whole thing where she's fighting for robot rights, but it's mostly treated as a joke thing, and which I mean,
Oh, it's so cringy too. So cringy.
yeah, it's very cringy, and it's like, oh, I'm sure that pissed off a lot of people. But yeah. And
They're
like, I don't know, I
rodents.
did kind of like some of the aliens. Like I liked the lady crime lord on Corellia, the fact that she's like this giant centipede type, like sentient centipede. Like I thought
Yeah.
that was kind of interesting that they're like, trying to be a little more creative and creepy with the different species of aliens. I thought that was kind of interesting, but I don't know. It was, but she was only there for like the first little bit, and then I don't know. Well, yeah, just getting into like the way the plot is kind of handled is that like Han has his girlfriend. They're on Corellia. They try to escape Corellia. Then they get separated, and Han joins the Empire. As like a I don't know, not even a stormtrooper, like even more of a mook trooper, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like they don't really tell. I don't know. It doesn't really feel like later on in the movie he's all like, "Oh, I've changed. I'm a different guy. I used to, be in the Empire." We have no real frame of reference for like how long he was there or how much
Yeah.
he actually improved or learned while he was there. It's
And
weird.
that's kind of this weird thing about the whole prequel thing about this. The most important thing about Han Solo is the one thing they never actually delve into, which is how he became a good pilot. Like we never actually see that. They skip over
Yeah.
that part, but oh,
Something.
they let us know like how he freaking got the dice.
Yeah. I think I don't know, my impression of Han, I realized this actually watching Rise of Skywalker, but also just like looking at this movie and like rewatching them is I feel like I don't know, something that I kind of like this about Han is that he's not I don't think he is actually the best pilot in the galaxy. I don't think he is actually supposed to be like an expert pilot. He's just the only one with the guts to pull off the stupid things that nobody else will try. Like he's just the boldest and the gutsiest pilot in the galaxy, and everybody else is like, I'm not stupid, and nobody else is stupid enough to try the things he tries, which is very like fitting with his character. But I don't know, and
Well,
like he's also just very lucky. But yeah,
to go into my completely formulaic argument based entirely off the fact that they shit canned the EU as they totally should not have and continue to prove they should not have. Uh,
eh,
Han Solo's prequel trilogy there is actually pretty effective at laying out why he became a good pilot. It's because he
hmm,
was fucking a pilot for the Empire for a little while and then got kicked out. And so he had to basically go into the underground because of that.
hmm,
So
gotcha.
not only does it explain why he's a pilot, it explains why he's a rogue and a fucking smuggler
Yeah,
type dude.
Yeah.
yeah. And then
Uh
that's another thing with. I mean, go ahead, media.
no, you go because I was gonna completely
Okay.
switch gears.
I mean, I was also gonna say like that's another thing with this movie is that like later on, oh, I'm not a good guy and stuff like that. I'm a rogue. Yeah. Or he's like, I'm not. I'm a bad guy. Like trying to be all flirty and weird. It's like we've seen nothing in this to really suggest that, other than the fact that you like, team up with other out. Like he's just like, oh, I'm an outlaw and stuff like that. It's like we see nothing in this to really suggest that he's become more of an outline, more of a rebel from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. We don't really see anything like that.
Yeah, he basically gets he's put on the wrong side of the tracks from the beginning, which is like
Yeah.
that's not an arc. That's like he started this way, he basically ends the same way, just sort of higher up in the community
The
of
food
it.
chain. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's like, because yeah, he starts out the movie, in trouble with a crime boss, getting out of trouble with that crime boss. He ends the movie in trouble with the crime boss, getting out of trouble with that crime boss. Like,
and I mean, if you count the
and then it's implied that he's about to get in, and then at in the epilogue or whatever, he's off to get in trouble with the crime boss again. Like, it's
and if you count
it's
like the way we meet him in The Force Awakens, like you could say that he basically never changed throughout his whole life canonically, and always just went through the same cycle of pissing off a crime lord and escaping from the crime lord. And
yeah, that was kind of his whole history, except for when he was working with the rebellion.
yeah, which
Yeah.
is lame and not dynamic.
I'm okay. I was fine with it in The Force Awakens because he even said like, I was basically traumatized. My son went to the dark side. My
You
whole
can be
life,
fine
my
with it
my whole my whole my
individually,
whole
but if
life,
you-
my whole life fell apart, and I just went back to what I was
What I
used
knew.
to before all that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can like each one individually, but if you take a look at it as a whole, it's
Yeah.
really
It
Well,
feels
and that's-
really formulaic. Yeah.
And that's where I wouldn't say that. I won't say that's the crux of the issue because I've already said that like 4 times for 4 different things.
There's a lot
But
of
Go
cruxes.
there's
ahead
a
and
lot
say
of
it
there's a
in.
lot of
Hey,
cruxes
hey,
and a lot of
just-
issues. There
Hey,
is
if
no
we're-
story here for Solo. Like Solo just
Yeah.
he's almost like a passive observer. Like he does make active choices and does suffer like the consequences of those choices, and his choices do drive the plot. But there's no impetus for change. There's no opportunity to change. He's just kind of the same, and it's because his one and only real character arc in this entire saga was already in the first Star Wars movie.
Yeah. Deciding to go from, just being out for himself to fighting for something higher. That's, his big character moment. And that was in the first movie. And other than that, it was just his relationship with Leia. Yeah. Although I don't know. Again, the part of this movie that I like is his relationship with Chewbacca. They meet. I do think the whole speaking Chewie's language thing was stupid, but like the fact that he's able to, I don't know, that like he's nice to Chewbacca and is able to like sympathize with him and let him go off and help his people for a little bit
Yeah.
until he comes back to help him out. Like that's the only real story going on here is his relationship with Chewie, and that's also kind of a, I don't know,
And
I
that's
not
mean,
really
that's
due
also
to any big changes in his
and,
character.
and that's also like just a silly thing because Chewbacca's like several hundred years. I think they actually give him an age here. It's like 180
He's
or something.
190 in this
190 in this movie, and they do live to like 200 to 300 years old.
Mhm.
Chewbacca is not just some mindless monster who is just all growly. Like he was a mechanic.
the
he
fact that
he was an
finds him
he was an
engaged.
officer during the Clone Wars. Like that's just so it's so silly that like this is a very civilized, very sophisticated Wookiee. This is a Wookiee from like Wookiee high society almost. This is the Wookiee that was like best friends with Master Yoda.
Yeah,
And-
he's like a Wookiee prince or something like that,
Yeah.
isn't he? Or something?
I don't know what the expanded universe thing with him was as far as his
The
relationship with
expanded
the other
universe
Wookiees.
Okay, so essentially in the expanded universe, all the Wookiees were enslaved under the Empire because
Yes.
Yeah.
not, and so it was because there were good reasons for it. One, they were hard workers. Two, they were mechanically minded and they could fix stuff really well. So they were just like, let's enslave them and force them to work on ships. When things like Rebels dropped, they put them in spice mines, which was not how the Wookiees were enslaved or should have been. It was
Right.
for that's like simply for the manual labor part of it, but like in the expanded universe, Chewbacca himself was a slave for a little while. Han Solo came and freed him,
Right.
and so Chewbacca swore a life debt to Han because of that release, because that's like a thing that Wookiees
Right.
do. And so that's how the two sort of ended up being buddy for fucking ever.
Yeah.
Like,
But like, and that's kind of where this gets a little annoying in this one, where it's like he's not a slave when Han first meets him. He's basically a rancor. You know, he's just he's the thing that these like Imperials, you know, toss their trash, toss their deserters to be eaten. It's like,
yeah,
I thought the Wookiees were supposed to be smarter than this. They're not dumb animals. And
yeah, and there's like they're not just like randomly violent to things that get tossed to them. They're sentient and they're typically pretty caring about things. Like it's a weird, it's a really weird kind of thing if you're familiar with like the general lore behind stuff.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. And like, I don't know, it is the Empire, so I can kind of see them just thinking like, oh, he's just a dumb animal. But it's like, I don't know, seems like the Empire is a little smarter than that and a little more aware of, you know, the species that they're conquering. Like, no, you know, that's a waste of a Wookiee. You know, send him to work doing manual labor. He's strong, or, you know, have him fit, you know, like you said, have him be a mechanic or something. But
yeah, I mean, the expanded universe does go into this. The Wookiees were a well-known race of peoples. Even if we just go by canon, the Kashyyyk was the site of a huge battle of the Clone Wars. There were Wookiees that were being targeted by fucking bounty hunters and Trandoshan fucking.
There's
game hunters in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, the Clone Wars episode.
Yeah, there were a lot of. Pretty much everybody knew what the Wookiees were throughout the galaxy. They were a famous race. Like, they weren't an obscure one. So, like, the idea that, well, a lot of the thing about this is that, and this is true of a lot of movies that come from franchises that have deep roots and a lot of stuff to watch. The writers haven't watched it all, and they don't know about all of it, and they might have been like, you know, caught up on the continuity a little bit. They might have had like a hip pocket class on it, but fucking they don't really. They don't know it as good as the fandom does, and so they're going to make mistakes like this because what they've seen maybe for themselves is like the movies, and they're like, oh, fucking Chewbacca is threatened with ripping people's arms off if he loses in a game. Clearly that means he's like a savage with no intellect. Let's put him in a cage and just have him kill people for no reason. It ain't like that. Like, Chewie's not supposed to be like that, nor is any Wookiee.
So that's weird, and I'm sure that's like annoying to like fans of the series and stuff like that. It's like
particularly fans of Chewbacca, who has quite the fan base, especially especially right now with Peter Mayhew died last year. Shortly before the release of Rise of Skywalker, and it was kind of amazing seeing like how many people were like really torn up about his passing. Like it was. I think I saw more like rest in peace Peter Mayhew tweets than I did Carrie Fisher tweets back in 2016. Wow. Like that, it was, it kind of hit a little differently.
I mean, like, if we want to go into it, there is a very good reason that people love Chewbacca, and that's because his character has no understandable lines of dialogue, but everything they show about him shows us exactly how he is as a character. He's basically on the mute character level of being a character, and people love that. When you can successfully direct something to make it come across to you how that person is and what their personality is,
Yeah.
even though they don't say anything. That's really
Yes.
dope, and that's really effective, and people get drawn to that.
Yeah, and I know Peter Mayhew was a veteran of the stage all his life. Like that was always his bread and butter. Like he only did like the occasional movies and usually wearing like heavy makeup and stuff.
Yeah,
And it
as
also
Chewbacca.
and it also like it kind of goes back to the thing that is oft said about George Lucas, where he was a very visual director. Like he was a decent enough writer, at least when it came to story and character. But he was very much experimental and visual, and he was the weird one of his group of peers, and it really did show with Chewbacca in that original trilogy where he had a lot of very visual humor, a lot of very visual emotion and stuff, despite being in all this heavy fur and makeup.
Yeah. Yeah, he was very emotive and very memorable, despite, yeah, like you said, having no discernible dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So carrying on,
Yep.
the other major problem I have with this movie, we already mentioned the whole droid rights thing, which is so ridiculous. Uh, Lando being Pan and being played by fucking childish Gambino. Uh,
I mean, it's not the first time Donald Glover has acted
oh no,
before,
he was an actor.
and
He was an actor before he was a musician, if I recall.
yeah, I think so, yeah. Or
He
maybe, or
was
at least
in
while, yeah, so, like, I don't know.
This is Corellia.
But
Don't get you slipping up.
yeah, so I don't know. I didn't hate having, like, yeah, Childish Gambino or Donald Glover is his real name.
He was okay. He was okay.
Yeah, he was okay, but it was kind of, it, I don't know, it was hard to imagine him becoming Billy D. Williams.
Yeah. Well, he also just looked kind of uncomfortable with the lines he was given about the fembot.
Yeah.
like the whole oh trust me it works, and he just like looks like, oh my fucking god, when I said I wanted to be in a Star Wars movie, I didn't want it to be like this.
Well, that was her line, wasn't it?
yeah
But he
yeah, that was
reacts
her
to-
line, but that was just
Yeah.
and then I think the last couple minutes of this movie are also just a clusterfuck, where it's just
Yeah.
like twists for the sake of twists, and it's like two or three twists too many right at the end. Like there's just
Yeah.
back to back to back to back to back betrayals, and it's just it makes it to where it's way harder to, because it was already kind of hard to care about any of the characters in this movie because it's just not very good, but with that especially, it was just like, oh my god, I don't care, just shoot just shoot people, just shoot them all, I don't care anymore.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, didn't really care about Beckett. I did kind of, I don't know. I did kind of like there was some slightly clever like I guess visual storytelling where they kind of hinted us, like at the very beginning when he's first introduced, and he's like, okay, who's the commanding officer? And like Han looks at his jacket, he's all like, that would be you, Captain. And he looks down and like I like that little hint of like, oh, this guy isn't like who he says he is, and you see like all the holes in that. I thought that was kind of a interesting bit of like visual hinting. But other than that, yeah, I just didn't really care about him. His whole thing of like, oh, don't trust anyone, blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, whatever, okay. But yeah.
I think Woody Harrelson does good enough in his role.
Well, yeah, he does good
he's-
enough in the role he's given. It's just not a great role.
Yeah, and I think the same goes with most of the actors. We already talked about
Yeah.
Peter Mayhew, and talked a little bit about Donald Glover, who again he does fine, I guess. Let's talk a little bit about Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo. I think he was okay.
Yeah, he had the shooting down. Like he had the whole like the way I don't know. He had the Han way of shooting down during like the riot and all that, where and stuff like that. Like that was a moment where I was like, oh wow, that is like he definitely watched the old Star Wars movies and paid attention to like how Harrison Ford would point and aim and stuff like that, always have that the way
Well,
the way you would he had a very distinctive way of doing it that I was like, oh hey, that's pretty impressive there. And yeah, he was okay.
It's the thing of it is, the only thing about him that I disliked, and this is going to be kind of stupid and superficial, and I admit it, was his voice. It didn't seem like a very Han Solo-y voice to me. It was super soft. Like they should have gotten somebody who smokes and drinks a lot to play him, or just
Yeah.
dubbed it over or altered it.
Yeah, like
Kinda hard to
I just
imagine
looked it up
kid
because
turning into Harrison Ford. I can see
yeah,
it.
yeah,
I
Alden
assume he smoked and drank a lot between the movies, so
Yeah.
that
Alden Ehrenreich, which I've been pronouncing it wrong all these years. I just looked it up. It has a very different accent than Harrison Ford. Even though they are both Americans, I was actually kind of surprised. I was like, I think Alden Ehrenreich must be British or something because that accent just seems off. But no, he's American. He just must be from a very different part of America than Harrison Ford. And so, yeah, the voice is a little off, but they're not gonna ever get it like really perfect, especially with like he is playing a young Han Solo, but he's not playing like a significantly young Han Solo. This isn't like the opening scene of Indiana Jones 3 where you have like 15-year-old Indy juxtaposed with like 40-year-old Indy. No, this is like comparing 20-year-old Han with 30-year-old Han. It's just not enough of an age gap to really provide that inherent separation, which again you see that in with Obi-Wan Kenobi in the actual Star Wars prequels, where like he's younger enough than Alec Guinness to where you can very much buy his own interpretation of the character being just a younger version of Alec Guinness's version
like a
of Obi-Wan.
30 years younger version of Alec Guinness. Yeah.
Whereas this, like, he does a good job with the body language, getting the Harrison Ford mannerisms down, but his voice and his just the way he is written, it feels a bit like a copycat, but it's not close enough, and so it kind of takes you out of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
Which is just another reason why which is just another reason why the whole ordeal was just a bad idea from the start.
Yeah. And again, like at the end of the, again, the weird passing weird way the passage of time is portrayed here, at the end of this movie, he's off to, get that job with Jabba that he's going to be in trouble for at the beginning of a New Hope. Like,
yeah.
This is basic, like he's gonna turn into he's gonna turn into, Harrison Ford in like a year or whatever, basically.
Yeah. It's longer than that. I think it's kind of implied that he does several jobs for Jabba in between there.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's fair, I guess, but yeah.
He was kind of, well, I mean, like, again, if we were going off the fucking EU, he would have been in Jabba's hut gang for like quite a long time, and only, that's a lot of stuff in the EU takes place over longer time periods than the stuff that's portrayed in canon right now.
Yeah.
And I guess it's kind of supposed to be implied that he's like started the rebellion at the beginning of this movie, which is also weird and doesn't make much sense.
Well, the rebellion was, I mean, for real, the rebellion was there from like even before the Clone Wars ended. You had Saw Gerrera with his guerrilla fighters just fighting oppression and stuff back in even during the Clone Wars, and then the Separatists they never like really went away. Yeah, the droid armies got shut down and stuff, but a lot of the planets that were in the Separatist alliance were still very much against the Republic, and just saw the Empire as just a worse version of the Republic, and continue to fight against them. And so you do have the Cell, the Marauders here, the Marauders here, which are one of the many factions in canon now that will eventually join into the Rebel Alliance.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. And that is also another I don't know, thing with this is like like when we meet Han in A New Hope, he's jaded. He's basically just out for himself. He's just like, I'm not interested in working with any kind of rebellion. I'm not interested in being part of any kind of, higher cause. And this movie like has him basically teaming up with a bunch of misfits, but then like they try to, I don't know. Like if I were to do it, I would have had this whole, team up with these misfits go horribly wrong, and that's why he ends up jaded. Why he decides that, there's no point in fighting for higher causes because they always go bad and they never succeed. But just the way that this goes, it's like I don't know. It doesn't feel like yeah, it doesn't feel like like he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would who would walk out on the on the rebellion trying to take out the Death Star and stuff like that in A New Hope and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't see how this Han became that Han. I just don't see it. So
Yeah. Another thing, and this is just a very minor observation I made when I first watched this, with the way his hair is and with his accent especially, it's much more Midwestern. I think Alden Ehrenreich would have made a very very fine Luke Skywalker.
fair.
It's fine. Yeah, I'd go with that.
Yeah, that's just
I
a
mean, I was
random
looking at it
observation
and-
I made.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at it at all the different actors that were considered for Han. There was like Taron Egerton, Dave Franco, and stuff like that. Like, there was a bunch
Dave
of
Franco would have been so distracting.
Yeah, that would have been weird. But yeah, no, it was like there was a lot of people considered
Yeah.
for the role. So
Yeah, you
Yeah, but-
for a role
and
like
it's
that,
hard. It's
for a
hard
role.
to find someone who can capture a young Harrison Ford. So
Yeah.
I kind of understand.
Well, and for a role like
It was
that, you
always gonna be
would
rough.
for a role like that, you would not want someone overly recognizable. Which the Francos, all the Franco brothers, they have this very distinctive like cheek and chins that you know a Franco just by looking at it, even if you've never seen them in anything before.
Yeah, pretty
So
much.
that would have been so distracting. I'm so glad they didn't pick him. Nothing
Yeah.
against Dave Franco. I think he's a very fine actor. I think James Franco
sure.
is a better actor, but I think everyone thinks James Franco is a better actor. James Franco is a
Yeah.
very good actor, but I
Yeah.
just no, I do not want them playing important characters like that have already been played so iconically by other actors decades ago. It's just so distracting when
Yeah.
people do that.
Yeah, and like you look at who they were considering, there was like Miles Teller, Ansel Elgort, Jack
Yeah.
Rayner, Scott Eastwood, Logan Lerman,
Oh, Scott Eastwood probably would have done a good job.
yeah, Emery Cohen and Blake Tenner, and then like I said, Taron Egerton, and Taron Egerton would have been very
Taron
distracting
Egerton's
because
too,
he is
yeah.
actually British, and so that would have been
Yeah.
odd. But
I don't think he's a good enough actor to really pull out the accent. He's not very good in the X-Men movies.
yeah, but as far as looking the part, Scott Eastwood
Wait,
probably
am I
would
thinking of the
have.
right guy? No, I'm not even thinking of the right guy. That's how. No, Taron Egerton was the guy from the Kingsman, right?
Yeah, he's in. Yeah, he's
Okay,
the main
yeah,
character in
yeah.
Kingsman. Yeah, he's.
I was thinking of when you first said the name, I thought of Beast in the new X-Men movies, who I think
No,
is
that is
Holt, Nicholas Holt.
Yeah, Nicholas Holt. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know why I got those two confused. They look
Yeah.
nothing alike.
Yeah, but no, Alden Ehrenreich did fine. Like we talk about it, but it's like it's hard to capture to imitate it, like anyone was gonna have a hard time with this
Yeah.
role, and he did fine. So
Uh,
it just wasn't a great script.
Shifting gears, someone who I don't think did fine, and I think was the worst actor in the movie, Amelia Clarke as
Yeah.
Kira. I don't watch Game of Thrones. Maybe she's phenomenal as Daenerys. Maybe she's, very just subtle and great in that series. Every movie I've seen her in, she's been like the worst part.
I mean, a part of it is just that she hasn't been in any good movies, but
Like she was in
again,
she was in
but
she
I
was
think
in
it's
she was in Terminator Genesis as Sarah Connor in the very same
yeah, she was
Terminator
young.
movie where Jai Courtney was Kyle Reese. Jai Courtney did a better job in that movie than she did.
Yeah, no, I think Amelia Clark kind of has the same problem. We talked about this. I know you and I have talked about this media regarding Brie Larson,
Yeah,
in Captain Marvel and stuff like that. That like I think Daenerys or I think Amelia Clark is good when she has a good director who can work with her and give her a decent script to work off of and act off of. But in this case, again, not a great script and stuff like that, and just not a great role. And I think that's at least part of it because, yeah, I mean, yeah, we know my stance on Game of Thrones and stuff like that. And
yeah.
again, huge bag of worms that we're not going to open here, but I don't know. But yeah, no, this was not a great role for her, and this was not a great performance from her. So yeah, and it's
Uh,
like,
who else was in
and then
this
and
movie?
like all, gotta love the sequel bait in this one as well. The sequel bait that's probably not going to be at all paid off. The whole
Oh no!
Darth Maul reveal. What
See,
the
that was
fuck
such a
that?
stupid. Okay, I got a bone to pick with that because I love Darth Maul and I love that they got both Ray Park and Sam Witwer to do the role.
Oh, I didn't realize they got
Yeah,
Ray Park back. That is
yeah.
that is good. I'm happy
Ray
with that.
Park is the actual like body and stuff, and then they dub over him
I know.
with Sam Witwer who plays Darth Maul in
Yeah,
Clone
no, I
Wars and
know. Ray.
Rebels.
Yeah,
But here's the thing.
yeah, that is awesome. I will watch Ray
Yeah,
Park as Darth Maul, like all day, every day. He's
yeah.
amazing. He's an amazing stuntsman. So I love that. But like, just having him
Here's
here
the
was
thing. This is sequel bait that got paid off before this did. Because we already know
uh,
Darth Maul's ultimate fate because of Rebels. Like I haven't actually
right.
sat down and watched Rebels, but I did sit down and watch the episodes involving Darth Maul because I love
Yeah,
him and I love Sam Witwer. Sam Witwer is just he's
I
like
kind of feel
the
bad for
John
Peter
he
Serafinowicz,
is
but yeah.
Sam Witwer kind of is to Lucasfilm what John Ratzenberger is to Pixar. He's done a lot of different roles throughout Star Wars. He was Star Killer. He was the brother in the Mortis trilogy of Clone Wars. He's been Darth Maul. He's played like Imperial officers and stormtroopers and cameos and stuff. Um,
Hmm.
and he, you see him in interviews and stuff. He loves Star Wars. He really gives it his A game. And he only has like 2 lines in this movie right at the end. But yeah, it really was like, oh hey, Darth Maul's here. I wonder what they're gonna do with that. And then you remember what happens in Rebels, which came out before this, and you're like, oh yeah, that's what happens with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is essentially nothing as it relates to this. Um,
Yeah, it was just pure 100%
Fan
pointless,
service.
vacuous fan service. Especially with the way that like if it was just the reveal
pretty
that
much.
Kira was working for Darth Maul the entire time and Darth Maul was pulling Crimson Dawn strings. That would have been enough, but then he has to like do this like wink and nod to the audience where he ignites both ends of his lightsaber just to be like, yeah, yeah, I really am Darth Maul. I really am here. Cut to credits.
Nobody cares. Yeah. Well,
Uh,
cut to Han shooting first, and then
oh
cut to
yeah.
credits.
Other actor in this was Paul Bettany as
Yep.
what's his character's name?
It's Dryden or something like that. He's
Leader of
completely
Crimson Dawn.
wasted in
Uh,
this. Like wasted. Yeah, Dryden Voss, and yeah,
yeah,
no, he is too good. He was too good for this role.
yeah. Paul Bettany is kind of a chameleon. He's a very good B actor, and he's a very good character actor. He's very good at like getting these minor roles and just burying himself in them. If you don't know who Paul Bettany is, you probably know him mostly as Vision slash Jarvis
Yeah.
in all the MCU movies. But he was also in A Beautiful Mind as the spoiler alert for A Beautiful Mind, which I don't think really constitutes as a spoiler because one, it's almost 20 years old now, and two, it's based on a true story about a very very famous person. Paul Bettany was the imaginary best friend and roommate to
Yep.
John Nash in that movie,
Yeah. He
and
was
he's
also in
very
the Da
good.
Vinci Code, Master and Commander. Yeah, he's
Yeah, he's been
done a
in a
lot
bunch
of
of
great
stuff,
roles, and he's great in everything he does.
and I feel like he's the only one who realized how silly the movie was, and he just hams it up and chews some scenery. He's a cartoon character. He is more cartoonish than the CGI puppets in this movie.
Yeah. Or the robot, which was basically them saying, "Hey, Alan Tudyk was the best part of the last
Okay,
of
that might
Rogue
be
One. Let's bring in another droid and try to do the same thing and fail epically."
but make her woke.
Yeah.
Let's
Like, I'm
take
pretty sure that
Alan
was the whole
Tudyk's.
idea of is they were just like, okay, people really like the droid character in Rogue One. Let's try to recapture that. Nope, we failed.
Yeah, it's just make Alan Tudyk's robot a woke feminist robot. Uh, so
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
the action. I do actually like the action in this movie. The action kind of
Yeah.
saves a lot of this for me. Particularly the train sequence, and the final like Kessel Run bits. I was actually really into that.
Yeah. And I do also like the way they use Chewbacca in this. I feel like I talked about how with Rogue One, or yeah, we talked, with Rogue One is the first time where we really feel like where we really feel Darth Vader as this terrifying figure just for like those hallway scenes that he is in. And I feel like this is a movie that really does a good job of making Chewbacca feel like this powerhouse character that can just toss people around, is just throwing people and picking them up and spinning them around. I feel like that's the first time we really see this in this movie. And I think that's another thing that I kind of like about it. But and like you said, the action is okay. But
Yeah. There's just not really much else to say. They did really try to make this a Western. I think this is the dullest looking Star Wars movie as well. And I think a lot of people kind of pointed out how not artificial, because they did do a lot of practical stuff in this movie, but how tame it is. Like I kind of opened up with this podcast on. Star Wars has always been on the cutting edge of, Hollywood technology. Even especially I'd say especially with the prequels, way more than people even realize. And to a lesser extent, a lot of these new movies, which is one of the problems I've had with them, is that they look like, they certainly look and sound and feel like Star Wars for the most part, but it doesn't feel like a lot of these new movies are pushing things forward the way that George Lucas was, and this one really felt like a backslide, like a really hard backslide, as far as all that goes. Like even comparing this to Last Jedi, like Last Jedi was striking. It had some beautiful cinematography, some beautiful shots and use of color, and a lot like all the red stuff in Last Jedi with the soul and the throne room, and it's just a very, very beautiful looking movie. And then this is just kind of ugly, and a lot of it looks unfinished or unpolished, and it doesn't work to its benefit the way it did with the original trilogy, where they kind of used the dinginess of the sets and models and costumes and stuff to add character where there wouldn't have been otherwise. This is just looks sloppy. It looks like it looks made for TV is what it looks like.
Does it? I'm currently thinking about The Mandalorian right now, but that one actually.
Oh yeah, Mandalorian looks more like a Hollywood
had better
project
set pieces than this did. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna make that comparison earlier. Like this is trying so hard to be a Western, and it fails. Yet Mandalorian, which had a proportionally smaller budget because it's a Disney Plus staple and not an actual blockbuster movie being released in the summer. Mandalorian just did a way better job at nailing that aesthetic than Solo does.
Yeah.
I'll tell you how it did it too. Okay, the problem with Solo is that they didn't have the appropriate people designing the sets because they refused to give them the ketamine that they needed because they were all baby Yodas. Um, yeah, like little known fact, all the set designers in Hollywood are baby Yoda, and he needs that ketamine or else he can't design the sets right. It's a sad truth, but it's just how it goes down.
I'm just imagining an army of baby Yodas designing the sets for like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington now.
Yeah.
Or like The Great Gatsby. Like they're all just behind the scenes on The Great Gatsby. Final verdicts for this before we roll into Rise of Skywalker. Um, I think this is the worst Star Wars movie, at least of the ones that have been released in theaters. Uh, I don't think it's terrible. I can certainly think of a lot worse that I've seen. There are plenty of movies that year that came out that were a lot worse. That was the same year as like The Predator, um, where the Predator tries to weaponize autism. I am not making that up, by the way. That is the actual plot of the latest Predator movie. Um, but I can't give this any higher than a 4 out of 10. It's kind of a disaster. It's a mess. It's not right, and it's not right in the head. It's just this malformed, um, malnourished, empty vessel of a film, and certainly not what I want Star Wars to be.
Yeah. I think if I had to get into it, like it's not, it doesn't go anywhere or do anything that needed to be done, and it kind of played into a lot of the things that people were saying even before it came out, that we don't need to go into Han's backstory. It's not super necessary. Uh, which, yeah, it's not. But like, they could have done it well, but they didn't, and they also made it seem even more unnecessary by not having him go through any changes or go through the origin story of how he ended up like this, because he was like that from the start, more or less. And I think it was it wasn't good, and if I have to judge it on its own, then I would say it's okay. But if I have to judge it within context of the entire franchise, then it's very, very poorly done, and it does a lot of disservice to the franchise. And I'm quite disappointed in it. I'm not angry over it, but um, if I had to think of why it is that it didn't get what it needed to get, it may be because it was seen as a spinoff by those who were producing it. And so they were like, well, it's not in the main line, so we don't really need to focus on it and give it what it needs to have high quality. So, but
Yeah, it just feels like they didn't care.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shame. Yeah, Robert, your final verdict?
Like I said, like I liked it more than I thought I would, but I get my that's not much, so I would have to say like 5 out of 10 probably is where I would have to put it at. Like, I don't know, I feel like there's other stuff, like I feel like they focused on the wrong thing, should have focused on more interesting things, and yeah, like I said, just not enough to care about with this one, and just yeah, it doesn't really feel, I don't know, doesn't real I don't see how this Han becomes Han Solo in episode 4. So yeah.
Yeah. So, transitioning from the most pointless Star Wars movie that nobody asked for, to the most consequential Star Wars movie. It is the finale of the sequel trilogy, the last installment of what is now being called the Skywalker saga.
Skywalker saga.
Um,
Yeah.
and the last opportunity for Lucasfilm to give to make people give a shit about Rey. It's the rise of Skywalker, and I've only seen this movie once. I think all of us have only seen this movie once, and I saw it about a month ago. I saw it over a month ago, so we're not going to get as deep as with plot stuff in this, but
yeah. I watched this. It was funny. I watched this with my family, and like they're not critics, so don't judge them. But they, for the most part, like said that they liked it. And this, I guess, a common consensus among fans, but not so much critics, is that they liked it more than The Last Jedi, which I disagree with. I'll talk about that later. But even like my family who watched it and liked it, even they had to admit that there were some big gaping holes and problems with this movie. And it's and it was fun to point that out and discuss it with them, and they were kind of like, yeah, you're right, I know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you kind of lucked out, Robert, because I watched this movie with nobody. There was not a single other soul in the theater where I watched it at that time. I sat in the middle and basically watched it and laughed my fucking ass off the entire fucking time.
yeah,
Because I came in a little bit late. I didn't watch it right when it came out, and I already knew for a fact exactly how it was about to go. So I was just sitting down with my big old bucket of popcorn, fucking getting off to the Emperor hamming it up. And I was like, damn, he's hamming it so hard. It's beautiful.
Part of the movie that was any good, but also
I
part of the movie that nobody really liked was just, again, Ian McDiarmid having fun.
Yeah. So
he was on the same page as me. We were both vibing. Like, you gotta fucking. He was like, this movie's shit. I'm gonna ham it up, and I'm like, this movie is shit, Ian. Ham it up harder.
Yeah. So I saw this about 2 weeks after it came out, and we had a guys' night out. It was me and my two brother-in-laws. One of them is pretty critical, and also not that big of a Star Wars fan. He's actually he's a little bit older than me, so he was already like kind of a teenager when the prequels came out, and he wasn't very fond of those when he was that age. And then the other one is not critical at all, and he just loves everything. And we had a lot of fun with this movie. This is okay. Here's the duality of this movie, kind of broken down. This is the least ambitious of the 9 movies, of the 9 core Star Wars movies.
It's basically J.J. Abrams fan fiction. That's basically what it is.
It is the silliest goddamn thing I think I've ever seen. It is kind of funny, but I don't know how much of it was intentional and how much of it was just like, oh my god, they made the droid engineer thing like a tiny gremlin Muppet thing that goes, and Ian McDiarmid.
My brother-in-law was obsessed with that. I was like, he's not that funny.
Literally, literally one of the first lines in this movie is Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor, who, yes, he is back. Everyone knows that. It was in the trailers. It's in the poster. He's back. They never explain how, which I'm actually kind of fine with. I don't like it when my fantasy shit tries to over-explain shit. But he's back, and one of the first lines he has is the line from Revenge of the Sith, where it's like, the dark side is a path to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. And the reveal that he has been every voice inside Kylo Ren's head. And it goes from like Vader to Snoke, and then Kylo Ren's like, I killed Snoke, and he's like, I created Snoke. And it's just a test tube with a bunch of failed Snoke clones, and it's just so stupid looking.
Yeah. I mean, even just like the opening crawl where they're just like, oh, the Emperor's like, Emperor Palpatine sent out this random message to everyone. It's like, wow, you guys are not even trying to
Oh,
follow the last Jedi
want to
here,
know
are you?
something? Want to know
You
something
didn't
way
even
more hilarious?
try to like follow that one up in any way whatsoever. You just
Do
threw
you,
that in the trash,
Robert?
didn't you?
Robert, not to make you want to commit fucking Robin Williams or some shit, but you want to know where they actually first revealed that?
Or it was
Fortnite.
oh my
They
god.
had a Fortnite crossover in the lead up to this movie where it was like a
Mm.
Fortnite event where you could play as like Ray, Finn, Poe, and whoever else, and you get the message from the Emperor saying that he's back. Fortnite is canon,
Oh my
Mm.
fuck.
which means because Fortnite also made an appearance in Avengers Endgame. So does that mean that? And we already know that Star Wars is a movie franchise in the MCU because of Winter Soldier. So it's
Oh my
Mm.
gosh.
so
Yeah,
it's just
imagine.
yeah. So yeah, it's just connections. It's like
Okay.
poetry. It rhymes.
Imagine dropping from the battle bus and flossing on Palpatine to kill him. That would be pretty dope. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. But
Fortnite
like
is cancer.
yeah. And then we have that like I don't know. And then we have that one part of this that I thought was kind of cool. And this is um kind of something I was talking about earlier regarding how that like we have this I don't even remember why they were running, but we have, them flying the Millennium Falcon and stuff like that. Poe and Finn like flying the Millennium Falcon, I guess, getting information from a spy or something like that.
Yeah,
And just,
and all it is
who
confirming that the Emperor is alive and that he's on some planet, and they had to like hardwire download,
yeah.
like not just pass the message, not just hey, here's the chip with like the 3 lines of dialogue that you're gonna break this down into. No, we had to like take this huge cord and plug it into R2D2, and it takes 5 minutes to download,
Yeah.
and all it is
Yeah.
just basically confirming what was in the
Yeah.
opening title crawl,
Yeah. And then they basically like start hyperspace jumping to a bunch of planets.
which
And
makes no sense.
I mean,
Mm.
I thought it was kind of cool because it reminded me of A New Hope when where like Luke's getting on Han's case about not being it about like what's taking you so long to make the jump to hyperspace and stuff like that. Han's like, this isn't that simple. I need to plot it out properly, or we could end up, inside of a star. We could end up, running into something. And then like Poe basically, starts doing a bunch of jumps, and he like ends up like, in planets, in these, flying between these cities. And that was a thing where I was like, okay, so this is like how good the Millennium Falcon is when it's got like,
Yeah,
the actual best pilot in the galaxy
it's
flying it. But
so
I don't know.
it's
It
so
was
good that could just ignore gravity well.
yeah, yeah. I'm sure that the science in that is completely wrong, but I was kind of
Yeah, I mean
that's kind of cool.
it goes against stuff that was established and reestablished in Rebels. In Rebels,
Fair enough.
I haven't seen it. I've only heard. The Interdictor class Star Destroyer is apparently in Rebels and plays a significant role in a couple episodes. So what interdictor technology does is it creates an artificial gravity well that prevents people from jumping into hyperspace, which is also what planets do. Planets naturally have gravity wells, so it should be completely impossible to hyperspace jump from planet to
Uh,
planet like that. And it's
okay.
just so.
Gotcha.
I mean, you
So
could
again,
like
there.
you can hand wave it like, oh, maybe these are like maybe these are more like asteroids or something that have like, or they're not big enough to have a significant gravity well, but you do
They
really
end up
have to
inside of
suspend
a
your
city at
disbelief.
one point.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you
Yeah.
yeah,
do have to suspend your disbelief as far as that goes.
Look, 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 look,
and
look,
that just
look.
goes into another. I don't know, another one of the big problems with
Guys,
this, which
if
is
you're fucking thinking about anything at all and not just mindlessly watching this, you're going to get upset about it. I knew it going in.
yep.
Turn your brain off, Coop. It's fucking it's not fucking it you're not gonna think about it. Anytime you fucking think about something during this, you're just going to fucking end up in a rabbit hole inside your own head. And it was good that I had a brain chunk taken out beforehand, so it really helped out with that.
Yeah, I wish you'd have told me, Coop, because I could not turn my brain off for this. Like, this is one bit where I was kind of, oh, that's kind of cool, but, and that's just another huge problem with this movie is that in several places it ignores the continuity of the Star Wars universe. It ignores continuity from the other movies. It ignores continuity from J.J. Abrams' own movies at one point.
It ignores continuity from itself, Robert.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Speaking of which, like, very next scene, Poe's all angry about Ray for like, oh, you're and that train sequence was just whatever, who cares? But it's just like, you're not actually in the fight. And then the very next time they talk, nothing on that. Nothing. It's like, what happened?
Yeah. So, this is as good a time as any to kind of talk about some of the production problems that this had as well. And a lot of them very similar to stuff that happened with Solo. So again, this movie already had like it kind of a bunch of stuff working against it just by being the actual canonical follow up to Last Jedi, which again, super divisive movie. Not a lot of hate towards it. And it was originally going to be written and directed by Colin Trevorrow, who is probably most famous for Jurassic World.
Oh gosh.
And we actually had a question about this, so I'll get into it later. Colin Trevorrow's vision was very, very different. And he left because of disagreements with Kathleen Kennedy and was replaced by J.J. Abrams coming back. And I don't know what J.J. Abrams' opinions on The Last Jedi actually are. I don't think he hates it. I do think that he was disappointed with some of the directions Rian Johnson took in that movie, and
that Ray should be nobody, even though I was totally fine with that.
And he had a hard time kind of rectifying that. I do think with the general theme, it kind of lands on its feet more times than not, which is why I am going to give this a positive rating. This is certainly going to get a higher than Solo, because the whole theme of like rejecting tradition and stuff, I think, does land on its feet throughout the entire trilogy. Like you have Rey from nowhere. Her parents were technically nobodies, but her grandfather, and I also called this in the Last Jedi podcast that we did, like, oh yeah, I mean, they could easily do like, oh yeah, your parents were nobody, but your grandfather.
I just hate.
but the fact that she kind of rejects being a Palpatine by the end. Same thing how like Kylo Ren, like he first rejected the Skywalker lineage, and then he eventually like does by the end of this movie reject the Vader-ness inside of him. And you do, Fan rejecting his position as a stormtrooper, Hux kind of having a face turn here as the traitor.
Not really.
Like it does land on his feet. The one problem I have on that front, Rey should have said she was a Palpatine. Like, if she was really stealing that name for herself and being like, no, from this point on, the Palpatine name is not going to be synonymous with evil. If she was really about that, she shouldn't have said she's Rey Skywalker. It just I did kind of like it. I'm not completely against it, and I did actually feel things in that scene. I do think she kind of earned that closure with Luke and Leia there. But it kind of goes against one of the few things that really was working about this movie, and undercut it a lot. I would give it a much higher rating had that stuck the landing a bit more.
It just all felt like fan fiction to me. It just felt like, the fans didn't like Buddy, so I'll change that and make her a Palpatine.
I'm gonna be real. I feel that way about literally every story that tries to take place after Return of the Jedi.
Fair enough.
I could never. even the good stuff. Like, I really like Force Awakens, and I've seen Force Awakens a couple times recently. I've just like thrown it on as background noise, and I get into it. I really like the Force Awakens. There are plenty of things that I still like about the Last Jedi, and there's lots and lots of things to love about the Thrawn trilogy, and you know, Legacy of the Force, and all the books and stuff. But I can never escape how unnecessary a lot of it felt and how tacked on a lot of it felt.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know, I guess I'm trying to think where we're at right now in all this, but like, are we going by like what happens in the movie? But
another
we
production
could try
problem.
that, but it would be random as fuck.
Yeah, I mean the whole plot of this movie is right. Like here's basically the plot. So after finding out that the Emperor is alive, they have to try to find a way to Exegol. Rey just so happens to know how the way to find Exegol because Luke was also kind of on that path once upon a time and wrote it in one of his journals, which were part of the sacred Jedi texts that Rey stole in the last movie. Good continuity there, by the way. I actually like that. I like that did come into play later on. And so then, in order to find Exegol, they had to find the Sith Pathfinder. But in order to find the Sith Pathfinder, they had to find this dagger. In order to find this dagger, they had to find this random ship out on this on desert planet number 57, it seems. And this also just so happens to be the same ship that took Rey's parents. And that leads up to the reveal that she's a Palpatine, and that she was basically picked to be the next Emperor and become all of the Sith. All of the Sith. Every single one.
And then there's and you forgot about the most pointless side plot of this whole thing, which is 3PO apparently is not able to translate Sith language.
Okay, that was silly.
So
I'm gonna be real. I really like that. Okay, this is what I liked about the dagger plot.
Pointless. Okay, go ahead. Because
we've seen that bit so many times. In Indiana Jones and other Uncharted, Tomb Raider, a lot. It's a very video. This very much has a video game plot, and not like a BioShock video game plot. I mean like a Legend of Zelda video game plot. But what I liked about it, and you are fair to disagree, I like that this quote-unquote ancient dagger that opens up the ancient vault is actually only like 30 years old. Like, this dagger was clearly made like sometime recently because it lines up with the wreckage of the second Death Star in order to show where the Emperor's throne room landed, which is where the Sith Pathfinder was.
Makes sense, but anyway.
They explain it that it is in the Endor system. It is another moon of Endor, and that it's the one that has the most gravity or the strongest gravitational
pull. I just don't
pull.
understand how the heck the throne room is like still even partially intact. That's what I'm talking about. That doesn't make sense.
Hold up. Actually, that was an ancient dagger. It was Force premonitions that showed them how to make it back when the Sith were doing alchemy and shit. So, fuck you. I just fucking came up with a stupid way of doing that.
It's silly though. It's ridiculous. It's really dumb.
And yes,
and then,
but it's like they had that whole
So like they get they find the planet, they run into Lando, who just kind of shows up and is just like, I'm Lando Calrissian, and I was with Luke when he was here once upon a time. I'm gonna go by now, but I'll be back for the finale to pilot the Millennium Falcon again. And I mean, at least they didn't kill him off. And so then they find the plane, they find the ship, they end up finding the dagger. They lose the dagger. They almost lose Chewie. I'll get to that in a bit. And they end up finding the Pathfinder, but then I think Kylo Ren like breaks it or whatever. Rey nearly kills Kylo Ren. Does force healing, and then uses his Pathfinder to find Exegol and leaves like little beacons for the Resistance to follow, and then they engage in this massive space battle while she fights Big Peen Palpatine.
Oh, and don't forget, there's this whole thing of Finn wanting to tell
Ray something that they never does.
tell Ray something that we never find out what he's trying to tell her.
I know, it's probably something like this. I love you or something.
Oh my gosh, it's so stupid.
Let's talk about the fake outs for a bit.
Okay.
I am going to defend 3PO. I think Anthony Daniels, funny enough, was one of the best parts of the movie. And 3PO has always been one of my least favorite characters, but he kind of rocks in this movie. Like, it's kind of amazing what they do with him. And it is really stupid that he can't translate Sith just cuz. And yeah, we already know that, like, his memory gets backed up and he gets his mind wiped several times throughout the saga, so like it's not like a real significant
Yeah, he gets
loss
his mind
there.
wiped at the end of episode 3, and they try to treat it like this big significant loss. Oh, I'm taking one last look at my friends, and it's like
because it's kind of resetting because it makes me wish he was in this trilogy more. Because he is with.
I mean, that's another problem is that he's calling them his friends. He's only really ever talked to Poe. Poe's the only one of these people he's ever really talked to.
Before The Last Jedi, sure. But he is with them the entire time in this movie, and you can kind of surmise that, like, in between Last Jedi and this, he spent all this time with Finn, Rey, and Poe on their, like, missions and stuff, and when they were playing Fortnite IRL. I'm never gonna let that go, by the way. But it is kind of sad because Anthony Daniels is a good actor. It turns out, like I never considered him a good actor. I know he's been on in theater and stage his entire life, but he really sells this. And even when he quote unquote comes back, and when he comes back to like where he was at with Force Awakens. So he doesn't know Rey, Finn, or Poe, but he knows R2 at least, which is all that matters. It's all that matters to me, really. Just that would have been too much for me, honestly. I would have cried. Had R2's backup not worked. The other fake out, there's lots of fake outs. There's the fake out with just force healing. The way force healing works in general in this movie has caught a lot of flack. Even though I don't see how it really force healing has kind of always been a thing in the books and games and stuff. This is just the first time.
The way the force is used in this, I mean, I don't know. This is me, mostly a movie fan talking, but the way the force is used in this in general is weird in this movie. Like
it's a lot more like Force Unleashed. We'll get to Chewbacca because I actually have a lot of positive things to say about that were then undercut by gutlessness. And so yeah, it is very much it does take a lot more cues from Force Unleashed, it seems. Let's actually talk about the thing with Chewbacca now. Okay. Like I said, Peter Mayhew died before the release of this movie, so we didn't really know how they were going to address that. We knew he finished up his scene, so they probably weren't going to address that. But then you get the scene where Chewbacca gets captured, and Rey tries pulling the shuttle from the air, and Kylo Ren gets in like this tug of war, and she taps into the dark side and vaporizes the ship. I felt that. I was like, oh my god, did they really just do that? This movie will go up like 3 points if they actually just did that. Like, that's such a gutsy move. I was shocked that they were going to do that. Like, oh my god, they're actually having Rey tap into the dark side and do terrible things that's going to mess with their head because Chewbacca is a character she's been with this entire trilogy.
Yeah.
No, I mean, he was like the only other characters that was with her throughout all of Last Jedi. as well. And it's just like this is one of her best friends, and she just vaporized him because she got angry. Like that would fuck with her head so much. But then literally a minute later, it's like, no, Chewbacca's fine.
He's
He
back.
was on a different shuttle, and then Rey's like, oh my god, I can sense Chewbacca. He's all right. Okay, I'm not sad anymore. I was like, God
And I pretty much,
damn it.
yeah. And this was, again, this was me not being able to turn my brain off. I wish you guys had told me to turn. Maybe if I had been able to turn my brain off, I would have enjoyed this more. But to me, like, I knew he was on the other transport. I saw that there were two transports. I was like, he's on the other transport. It's gonna get away. And also with Rey using force lightning. So again, this is, book read or not book read. This is mostly just movie reader and half of Clone Wars watcher in me talking. So feel free to correct me on this one. But to me, it's like the idea of the dark side of the Force is that, I mean, it's kind of like the Emperor says. It's using your aggressive feelings. It's like you say, it's tapping into anger and using it. But to me, it's like it feels like it's supposed to be like using it to destroy something. So how does Rey trying to pull, reaching out, trying to save a friend, trying to protect and rescue a friend, how does the Force translate that to destroy this transport? Like that's that's the weird thing for me of like what was a I don't know. And I know, like, tug of war with Kylo Ren and stuff like that, but it's like those are aggressive feelings towards him, not towards the transport, it seems. So that was a weird thing for me there, but I don't know. And just for me and the way I've understood the Force, I guess, in the movies that I've seen. But yeah, I don't know.
Hmm.
Feel free to tell me I'm an idiot or that I don't get it, but
The
like,
force in the movies has kind of like a loose thing about it. It's not like
yeah.
super heavy on the rules. So like,
Which was something I liked also about The Last Jedi, is that it was like, I don't know, is that it played with that, is that it used that ambiguity and worked with it, and that was something else that I liked about it more than this movie. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I mean, like, that was pretty much all I had to say. Just
Okay.
like it's a little bit loosey goosey with the magic, but
Yeah,
like
especially when it comes to the forced teleportation stuff that they do a lot
Yeah.
with, a lot more than they should have.
Yeah, no, that was another. Again, yeah, all these holes and stuff like that. Like in the last movie, Luke dies, just allowing or just, transporting a likeness of him, teleporting a likeness of himself and stuff like that. But in this movie, and I guess and also in The Last Jedi, they did kind of hint at the possibility of things being able to like teleport with, Kylo Ren, or yeah, after like the first time Kylo Ren and Rey interact, she's in the rain and then he looks at his gloves and they're wet and stuff like that. So they
Yeah,
kind of hint at that, but like they're tossing, necklaces and lightsabers through space and time, something that Kylo Ren basically said would, and they're, communicating with each other, something that Kylo Ren said would kill them, would kill Rey at least in the last movie. But in this one, they're doing it all willy nilly, and it doesn't, just like, again, just ignoring the continuity of all these movies stuff.
yeah, yeah. There are a couple bits of that where I was like, oh, that's actually a really cool way of using it. Again, it's like they do. It does incorporate well into the action scene, especially with Ben Solo versus the Knights of Ren. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, and I get it. It's kind of cool, but it's still just like, it's cool if you turn your brain off, which
yeah.
I couldn't do.
Um, so one thing I wanted to bring up as far as little details and stuff goes, um, I don't like that Rey just fixed Anakin's old lightsaber.
Oh yeah, that's
I
right.
wish she would have had her
I didn't even
own
think about
by
that.
the beginning of
Yeah.
this movie. And that's actually something that was in Colin Trevorrow's script. That was something Colin Trevorrow wanted to do. He wanted her to have turned her staff into a double-bladed lightsaber.
Like
That
what we
was
see, like what that dark side version of her has, basically.
no, less stupid than that.
Oh,
uh,
I thought that was kind
no,
of cool.
more. Apparently, that's kind of what she does at the end when it's the orange lightsaber, and it's got the
Yeah.
handle in, and apparently, like she used her staff to make it. Um, but she grew up using the staff to defend herself and stuff. So like
Yeah.
transitioning that into like a force pike or like a lightsaber spear thing like the guards in Force Unleashed use, or a double bladed
Like
lightsaber
Darth Maul.
would so much fit her natural combat inclinations than just a lightsaber would. And also, I
Yeah.
just don't like the reverence. I don't like the idea of lightsabers having reverence. I very much like in A
Being
New Hope.
sentient.
I very much like in A New Hope where like it's your father's lightsaber.
And Luke's just
Luke
kinda
turns it on, twirls it around a couple times, and then just tosses it aside. Like,
Yeah.
I very much prefer that these are the tools of a Jedi. They're not like these all important, all powerful things. Like that's not even Anakin's original lightsaber. Anakin went through like a dozen lightsabers as a Padawan.
Well,
Yeah, no, exactly. One of those things in episode 2 where like Anakin keeps losing it. It's like, yeah, don't lose this. This is something that you should have, but it's like, yeah, he
Well,
goes through 100 of
I
a
think
dozen of them. Yeah.
I think really the only thing that was kind of like that kind of put that as this is part of the prequel's fault, I think, because they gave Yoda a lightsaber, and
Yeah.
that if they had Yoda be a Jedi Master who doesn't use a lightsaber ever, that would have been, that would have kind of kept things the way they kind of should be around lightsabers. But like that was what basically initiated into this, where the lightsaber is now mad important, because it's if you look at just the original trilogy, Yoda doesn't use a lightsaber or teach Luke anything about the lightsaber. The Obi-Wan teaches him a little bit about it, and basically just how to deflect blaster bolts, because that's the only thing that's really important with it at this point in time. Because there's very few people that use lightsabers. The the lightsaber does fall because Vader chops Luke's hand off, but Luke just builds a new lightsaber. It's not like, oh, I got to go back and get that lightsaber specifically. He makes himself a new one.
Yeah.
Like putting some sort of like attachment or like very important thing to a lightsaber is kind of dumb, and it kind of goes against the whole Jedi thing in the first place, because the Jedi,
they're not supposed to have attachments.
No, they're not. They're supposed to let things go and move on and stuff like that. And also, the most respectable Jedi, I feel, would be the ones who never even pick up a lightsaber, who just remain constantly at peace with things and don't need to actually fight them.
Yeah.
But who knows? Like,
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
God, what else? What else
Oh
is
yeah,
there to talk?
and Poe turns out used to be a Spicer.
Yeah.
Doesn't inform anything about his character. Doesn't matter at all. But he's a spy. But he used to be a Spicer, guys.
Oh yeah, that reminds me two stupid things about this movie that kind of tie into each other. One, all these Star Destroyers just happen to have Death Star level lasers on them. That's stupid. I thought we were done
goodbye,
with
power ceiling.
that. And then on top of that, Palpatine is all like, destroy a planet that they're familiar with, and I'm just like, what planet would they even care about? Jakku?
Tatooine?
No, nobody cares about Jakku. None of these characters have even been to Tatooine. Like Coruscant? Like, is Coruscant
This
even still
random planet
around?
with Poe's girlfriend. That
Yeah,
Poe's
it
girlfriend is on.
literally the planet they just got off of like 5 minutes earlier.
And she gave him her way off the planet, which it turns out she didn't even.
And this is another complaint with the movie. I already made the joke about like, oh, desert planet number 37 or whatever.
Yeah.
3 of the new locations in this movie are all rainy, stormy planets. You have the planet with Poe's girlfriend that gets nuked, but then it turns out the only characters that we even know from that planet are fine some way somehow, even though they made a big deal about them not being able to get off the planet without the like token that they already gave Poe. That whole token thing even works, which is just bad in its own right. You have that. Then you have the indoor moon with the Death Star pieces, and then you have Exegol. They're all 3 just storm planets, and they all look the same.
Yeah. And that's and then that's another thing with this movie is like, well, yeah, now they can just put planet destroying cannons on star destroyers, like, and also the Emperor can just cause a lightning storm from down on the ground with force lightning.
Creamy Sheev Palpatine and his forced lightning nonsense.
Yeah, it's like something that I saw several people talk about with The Last Jedi, and something that they said kind of in its defense is that, and I know that this is different from like the Force, not the Force Awakens, the one with Darth Vader's apprentice or whatever.
Oh, Force Unleashed.
Yeah, the Force Unleashed and stuff like that. I know this doesn't really line up with that, but something that they talk about, that I've heard a lot of people talk about in defense of The Last Jedi and in defense of, Luke not showing up and having this big epic battle with, this giant row of walkers, is we have never in any of the movies and none of the TV shows either, I don't think in the Clone Wars or Rebels or anything like that, we've never seen a Jedi perform like a feat of power like that. We've never seen a Jedi do something like that. Like, they're not.
But Robert, Creamy Sheev Palpatine is all of the Sith.
Yeah, Robert. I mean, I've got to disagree with you on a lot of stuff. Okay.
Go ahead. I understand.
Poe being a spicer is super fucking important, Robert. Okay, because it explains why if you want to be his lover, you got to get with his friends. Okay, like it's deep lore. It's getting it in there. You gotta love Creamy Sheev, and you gotta love Poe's spice background.
Again, this is me not being able to turn stuff like that. And you know what? I don't like being told to turn my brain off. I don't know. Again, this is like, the part of me that likes to be critical and stuff like that. I like it when I like a movie in spite of having my brain turned on, or I especially like a movie because my brain is turned on. Like, I don't like being told to turn my brain off. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, if
I know that all of that is cool and stuff like that. It's like, where's the power ceiling now? What is the limit to the Jedi or the Sith now? What is where does it end at this point? Why did Palpatine need the Empire if he can just destroy an entire fleet with his fingers?
Because back then he wasn't all of this. See, Robert, I did turn my brain on for this movie, and if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to laugh and make fun of lines like, I am all of the Sith, and then Rey responds with, I am all of the Jedi.
Oh my gosh. God,
I mean, they ain't technically wrong. There's only 1 and 1. So they're technically all of them. That's all of them that are left.
And I know what that's supposed to mean and stuff like that. But,
I know,
it's
and
just stupid.
one thing I liked about that though is the ghost of Jedi's past. We get a lot of them in here. We get we get
Kaden and Ahsoka. I thought that was nice.
We get the obvious ones. We get Luke, we get Leia, we get Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, Yoda, I think
Qui-Gon.
like Ki-Adi-Mundi, Qui-Gon, which I really like because that really calls back to the fact that he was the first one to kind of force Ghost. And then we also get like Ahsoka. We get Kaden. I think Ezra was in there from Rebels. I remember seeing his name listed as like, yeah, I think it was literally all the Jedi that anyone cares about, except Plo Koon. Unless Plo Koon was in there, I don't know. I've only seen this movie once. He might have been in there, but it really was like, yeah, this. It was the one time in this movie where it really did feel like a finale and not honestly, like just filler.
Yeah, honestly though, if I didn't have the only one that anybody actually cares about in, okay, fucking gotta raise your hands for my boy Kit Fisto. Get fisted. That's what we fans of Kit Fisto say.
And they did bring, and they did also, they did give Wedge Antilles made an appearance, which I thought was
he got a cameo. He got a cameo. As did Nian Nub, who was once again co-piloting the Millennium Falcon. Pretty much.
That's what he did.
Sakura in there for Adi Gallia. I don't know who that is.
Adi Gallia doesn't even have a line in any of the stuff. I think she was in like one episode of Clone Wars, and that's it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, did she get like weird. Got by Savage Opress of all people or something?
I don't know. I don't even know who that is.
Was Asajj Ventress in there? Because she kind of did a face turn. She came over to the light.
I would have recognized her. I would have recognized her voice. She has a very distinct way of talking.
Yeah.
But no, Adi Gallia was a member of the Jedi Council, and she's also who you play as in Star Wars Jedi Starfighter. And if I remember correctly, she's the one who got like impaled by Savage Opress's head. And then got killed by
Opress's head. What?
Yeah, he horned her to
yeah. He like stuck his horns into her stomach.
I need to watch I need to finish watching Clone Wars.
I think that was season. I want to say that was the beginning of season 5 that happened.
It was one of the first things he did. She was like one of the first kills that he got.
Yeah, it was when they all like fight on the pirate planet with Hondo. But yeah, what else? I guess we could talk about some controversies and stuff. So apparently, and this completely blew my mind, there are people who actually like Rose Tico. I know. I'm as shocked as you are. People were complaining about her only.
Mind about this is Rose not.
No, I had to point that out. Let's talk a bit about Leia. Because this movie had another kind of behind the scenes issue that this had was the fact that Carrie Fisher died. I think before they even started filming, so they had to use a deep fake of her, for the few scenes that she's in, and it really did kind of undercut a lot of what they probably wanted to do with her. But I think it really worked out at the end. I thought it was very respectful how they handled it, and they had her kind of go out in a mix of how Han Solo went out and how Luke Skywalker went out. Like she also like just kind of meditates and projects herself to Kylo Ren, but in doing so she reconnects him to Han Solo. Harrison Ford makes a cameo, and apparently he only did it to stand in for Carrie Fisher. And they basically reenact the final scene of The Force Awakens, but this time Kylo Ren puts the lightsaber down instead of putting it through Han's chest, and then that's like
I mean, he
his
throws
redemption
it,
moment.
but
Yeah. Um, Such a waste. I bet he was really regretting that like 5 minutes later.
yeah. When he's getting his ass kicked. Yeah.
Like, God damn, if I didn't throw my lightsaber, I should have just like put it away. Lightsabers are
Run
very
to it.
useful.
Yeah. Yeah, again, the whole thing, like, oh, just lightsaber is just supposed to be a tool. But
Yeah.
yeah, and that's like, I don't know. And that's just another thing that kind of annoyed me though, is like it feels like they really over milked the nostalgia here with, like, Rey talking to Luke, and Leo showing up as a Force ghost, and then Lando talking to Poe, Finn, both of them, I guess. No, Poe, and then like Han, who isn't even Force sensitive, isn't even like a Force ghost. He's just like a memory.
That was a memory,
which
which is why he doesn't say anything in that scene that he hadn't already said in Force Awakens. Like it's line for line, beat for beat what happened in Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And again,
know,
and
just-
that was Leia, and we know Leia's powerful in her own right. And I was saying this with The Last Jedi. I know a lot of people were complaining about, like, oh, but we never saw Leia train. Like, yeah, it's been 30 years, though. You really think she didn't pick up a few tricks from Luke, or try to like expand her powers and just use them in a
and we
different
do
way
get
as
a
a
flashback where
non-Jedi?
we do see her.
Especially if you take in there's a deleted scene in Force Awakens where Maz Kanata uses the Force to like stop some falling rubble. Like, just because you're not a Jedi doesn't mean you're not Force sensitive, and that was always Leia's thing. Like, Leia was always extremely powerful and intuitive with the Force. She just never refined it to become like a Jedi, and now we actually get kind of the explanation why here is because she foresaw her son's death if she went down that path. She pulled back and just started using the Force as like a negotiator, a politician, a general, like just as a general leader, which I really like. I think that fits. I think that suits her character very well. And I really like the one or two scenes she has with Rey here, and I like the idea that Leia is the one that trains Rey. I like it a lot more than Luke, honestly. And so it's one of the things that I think this movie does. It edges out Last Jedi in a couple ways, and that's one of them. And speaking of Luke, a lot of people were like, J.J. Abrams is making fun of Rian Johnson. Like, I don't think they got the point of Luke's character in The Last Jedi. Like, the whole throwing the lightsaber over and people are like, oh, Luke would never do that. You're like, even Rian Johnson's like, yeah, that's kind of the point. He's in a bad spot right now, and the whole movie is about him getting back to basically where he was at the end of Return of the Jedi. And here it is very much the Luke that we were kind of hoping we would get. It's just now he's a Force ghost and not like, able to affect the plot in any significant way.
Except for to lift his, which
how does that X-wing still work?
Yeah, that was a part of it that I actually did kind of like. That was a part that I was kind of like, oh man, this was a huge like Chekhov's gun in The Last Jedi that you left out of it. Was Luke lifting his X-wing out of the ocean and stuff like that to pay off what his character, like his whole thing from Episode 5. That was something I was disappointed that they didn't do in that movie, and so that was one thing that I was okay with, but it was also kind of like, I don't know. Well, that was something I liked about this movie. That was one thing that I was okay with.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about some. Okay. Here's a controversy thing that is rooted in character. Let's talk about fucking John Boyega T-posing on the Reylo shippers. So at the end of this movie, Rey, who is all of the Jedi, gets zapped by Palpatine, who is all of the Sith. And they both die, I think. They do actually both well, Palpatine disintegrates, and then Rey is just, I guess, hurt because Kylo Ren like cradles her, and then uses Force Heal on her. And it's the most extreme case of Force Heal we see in this movie. We see it like 3 times in this movie, and the other 2 times it's like, oh, I'm just kind of patching up this little flesh wound hole in you. Here, he like basically brings her back to life.
Yeah.
And it's not even Rey doing it. It's Ben Solo doing it. And then he fades into the Force, which was not earned. He should have just died a la like Qui-Gon or whatever. He did not earn the Force ghosting. But before that, like him and Rey have this kiss, and it like made all the Reylo shippers super happy and then super mad when he died like a second later. And then John Boyega decided to
Arcos.
Yeah.
This is Star Wars version of Arcos.
It is.
Oh man, to think the whole time I was enjoying this, and you just ruined it for me.
I'm sorry.
I was having a lot of fun.
I'm sorry, Coop. I didn't mean to ruin it.
Being super evil and funny, and me laughing my ass off in an empty theater, and a fucking usher coming in and also laughing his ass off, and me high-fiving him on the way out. Fucking now you've just destroyed part of my life by fucking bringing that up. It's terrible.
Arcos was okay. It was an okay part of me. It's fine, but no, I'm sorry I ruined it.
But no, yeah, but then on Twitter, John Boyega decided to be like, yeah, Kylo Ren got the kiss, but guess who's laying the pipe? Talking about Finn.
There we go.
Yeah, that was hilarious. John Boyega. I hope John Boyega and Oscar Isaacs both have good careers after this, because they kind of burned down some of their bridges with Disney. Oscar Isaac said that he wants nothing to do with Star Wars anymore, and Daisy Ridley's getting cold feet about like the idea of returning as Rey after this, and so obviously there is no power in the universe stronger than a Disney paycheck, but for all intents and purposes, it looks like these actors are done, which is a shame because they're all very good actors. And that's something I think
Isaacs will be okay. I think Oscar Isaacs will be okay.
Yeah, I think John Boyega will be too, because John Boyega was already kind of like a really big up and comer before he did Star Wars. Daisy Ridley is the one I worry about.
Yeah,
because she hasn't had an opportunity to do much before or since. Like she was in that Murder on the Orient Express movie that Kenneth Branagh did. That's the only other thing I could think of that had her in it.
Okay. Yeah.
Look, honestly, like, I mean, given how I imagine Daisy Ridley might very well end up in a
you're cutting out for me. You're all cutting out for me. Are we back?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Sorry. What were you saying, Coop, about Daisy Ridley?
So I think it's very highly likely that she, in particular, but even perhaps all of them, could end up into some sort of Daniel Craig scenario where they keep on saying how they're not coming back and then keep on coming back.
Keep getting Craig back.
Yeah.
I mean, the difference is Daniel Craig also has the chops to get into other stuff. He was amazing in Knives Out, by the way.
Yeah. He's got a bunch of side stuff.
Well, right now, the future of Star Wars is well, when this movie came out, the future of Star Wars was up in the air. Since this movie came out, Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger, who runs Disney, and Kevin Feige, who runs Marvel, basically said that they're going to focus on Star Wars TV for Disney Plus. Like we had the Mandalorian. Mandalorian season 2 was announced recently. We got Clone Wars season 7 starting in like a few days at this time. It might even have started by the time you guys see this. I don't know when I'm gonna get around to uploading this. Um, so we got that, and it's really looking like they're gonna focus on the Disney Plus stuff because The Mandalorian was way more well received and way more well regarded and successful than even Rise of Skywalker was. And Rise of Skywalker did fine in the box office. It did fine in a way that made sense. You always have kind of that law of diminishing returns. Even when the movies are all great, like the original trilogy. Empire Strikes Back made like half as much as the original Star Wars did. And Return of the Jedi made a little more than half that Empire Strikes Back did. And so, like Force Awakens made something like 1.9 billion. I think Last Jedi barely like hit 1 billion. I think this movie just also barely hit 1 billion. It made a little bit less than I don't know, Robert, if you could look up the box office numbers for those. I know this was on pace to make less than Last Jedi, which I don't think is a bad thing. Again, it just makes sense. Very rarely will you see movies make more. One of the rare exceptions, though, was Star Wars, where Revenge of the Sith made more than Attack of the Clones, but not as much as Phantom Menace. Phantom Menace was the highest-grossing movie of those three.
And this movie made 1.065 billion.
Yeah, that was less than
$275 million budget.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I mean, obviously, it was super successful. It's Star Wars. It's Star Wars, and it's not Solo. And this movie was well received enough by fans. It was not as divisive, and this is kind of. I'll get to. Are we ready for final thoughts? Is there anything else we need to go over?
I mean, I don't know.
No, not really. We've been basically just looking over the broad strokes pretty much anyway.
Just another quick lightning round of problems that I have with this. Finn just knows which ship to go for.
Apparently, they're hinting that he's force sensitive. What was the deal with that?
I get that, but here's the thing, and like, yes, they're hinting that he's force sensitive and stuff like that, but he's like, I just have a feeling. 2 movies ago in The Force Awakens, Han's all like, oh, how are you gonna get us into this, to the shield generator if you don't actually know how? He's like, oh, it's okay, we'll use the Force. Han says that's not how the Force works. So J.J. Abrams is basically throwing his own continuity out the window there. That's another thing that. That kind of annoyed me there. Also, you have and then you have in Rogue One and in the last movie, or in The Last Jedi, you have this whole thing where the rebels find out that the Death Star exists, and basically half of the rebel army just bails. Half of the rebellion just quit and is like, nope, we are not prepared to deal with this. And then in the last movie, in The Last Jedi, they're all like, oh, we'll call for help and we'll try to get help. Nobody comes, probably because they're scared of the First Order. It's the First Order. You don't mess with the First Order. This movie, you have a fleet of planet-destroying Star Destroyers, and all of a sudden the entire galaxy is basically ready to go and help these guys out. Again, just, where were all these people in these last movies? Where were all these brave people, random people in all these other movies? Also, Hux being the traitor is just like, it's not even really a character arc for him. He's basically like, I don't know. It's like it feels like they know I thought it was very much in character, especially the reasoning he gives. Like, I mean, the fact that he's just doing it to spite Kylo Ren makes sense.
It's great.
But it feels like it's just a way for them to excuse it, because they know there's no other way we would buy him turning traitor, basically. So those are the last few things that just annoyed the crap out of me about this movie, because I couldn't turn my brain off.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
So
I'll go on a rapid fire of things that I liked about the movie. I liked that everybody in the galaxy ended their vibe sesh with Yoda on ketamine and showed up to the final battle against the fucking Star Destroyers high as balls and started getting the fucking shit kicked out of them, but also kicking some shit back. I dug that Hux is just such a fucking angry little nerd towards Chad Kylo that he's decided that he's going to go on an internet shit posting spree against him, but everybody realizes that he's actually just the Wojak that wears the mask over his crying face.
And then they just shoot him.
Yeah, I liked that. Finn is now a force-sensitive black guy, thereby making him objectively better than Chase Blackman. Like, obviously, all of these things are actually totally good. And Robert is just wrong, guys. Don't listen to him. Okay, listen to me, the guy who was who watched the movie, then went home and got drunk the same night.
Take it from the guy who literally had a part of his brain removed shortly before watching this movie.
It's a beautiful life if you just enjoy it in the moment, guys.
This is one of those moments where I wish we were on camera for this, because I'm losing it right now.
I'd be showing off the star like crazy.
This is one of those times where I wish I did drink, because maybe I would have been able to enjoy this movie, but I just can't. I can't do either.
So my final verdict: nothing in this movie made me angry like the really bad stuff in Last Jedi. There was no Holdo. There was no Canto Bight. There was no Benicio del Toro. Technically, we did have Rose Tico, but there was no Rose Tico plot line. There was no we have to it's not about destroying what we hate, it's about protecting what we love, while like trying to commit fucking kamikaze on Finn's ass. And there's none of that, and there was no like I said in Last Jedi, I liked what they ultimately did with Luke, but I didn't like that they set it up to where they had to do that with Luke. There's nothing like that with any of these characters. But at the same time, the engaging stuff in this movie, the stuff I liked, was not as cool as the engaging stuff in Last Jedi or even Attack of the Clones. Which is why I have to give this a 5 out of 10. It's better than Solo. I ask me tomorrow and I'll probably rank it higher than Attack of the Clones or Last Jedi, but right now I'm actually going to rank it lower than either of those. So those three, Last Jedi, Attack of the Clones, and Rise of Skywalker, are the weakest of this 9-movie saga, and they're all kind of like bad in different ways. Attack of the Clones is boring a lot of times. Last Jedi is frustrating a lot of times. Rise of Skywalker is a little bit of both, but it's not as boring as the boring stuff in Attack of the Clones. It's not as frustrating as the frustrating stuff in Last Jedi. Or maybe I have that back. I don't remember how I broke that down on Twitter, but they are all kind of on the same level quality wise. They're all not great movies, but they're not terrible. There's a lot worse stuff out there that you can watch. And one last little controversy thing, because I just thought of it. The fake ass wokeness on Disney. Emphasis on fake. So they made a big fucking deal over this movie having the first homosexual kiss, having a lesbian kiss. So it's like low tier LGBT rep, and then not only is it two characters whose names we don't even know, and it lasts for like a whole second maybe, but then they cut it out when they release the movie overseas. Like, oh yeah, we're woke, but only in America. We don't want to piss off China or anything. We don't actually want to stand for something, you know?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, though, what that really means, though, is that instead of the 7 out of 7, I have to give this movie a mere 6 out of 7 because the only truly perfect version of it is the Singapore version where they cut out the lesbianism.
I knew that was coming. Yeah.
Yes.
Coop, ladies and gentlemen.
Maybe when we get George Lucas's redo of it, like he did the original trilogy over again, he too will cut out all the gay stuff, and we'll be back to the way things should be.
God, I would love for a George Lucas cut of this trilogy. Just have him take all the footage that exists in the Disney archives and the Disney Vault, and just try to basically salvage this just in the editing room. I think he'd fucking do it. He'd fucking do it just in his free time. Like you wouldn't even need to pay him to do that. It's just like, I'm bored. I don't have anything else going on because I made $4.5 billion selling this to you guys. So sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not very good. We do have one question I wanted to bring up. The other ones were like, hey, you saw these movies? Did you think they were good? Yes and no. Yes, we did see them. No, they were not very good. But the other one was asking about, and we'll have this as like our first, or as our last kind of talking point, before we wrap this up and do our plugins. Talking about the original Colin Trevorrow script, which is, it was called Star Wars Episode 9, Duel of the Fates. And I saw a video like kind of describing it, but it was very much, it didn't have the whole Palpatine thing. It took place primarily on Coruscant, and it was all going to be like one big nuts battle with a lot more force powers and stuff. Again, my memory on this is rusty. I forgot to like reread and rewatch the stuff I had seen on it, but I do remember that like Rey was going to have her own lightsaber from the get-go, and it was going to be made out of her staff. It was going to be a double-bladed lightsaber. It was going to have like her final battle with Kylo Ren, and it was going to be focused on like Finn and Poe trying to recruit people to the Resistance for this one big final battle of Coruscant for the soul of the galaxy.
Huh. So, like, are they asking,
cool.
would we have liked to have seen that more?
I mean, they
sure.
asked to like talk about it and kind of compare and contrast, but I don't have the stuff in front of me to really do that.
I feel like I would need to see that video. I mean,
I'll tell you what. And that was,
I like the sound of that more than a lot of what we got here.
And I'll tell you what, Will Tritz. I'll tell you what. I'll make a discussion video about that. I'll really dig in, see what all information I can find on it. I will compile it into a doc, and then I will actually give my thoughts and opinions on it in like a 30-minute discussion video on my own time. I will do that sometime in the next couple months, because that does sound very interesting, and we've already been going on for over 2 hours, and that really is something that we
congratulations, dog. You didn't even have to fucking donate on Patreon to get that. That's some real good work you did there. Also, it's real cheap of your ass. I hope you fucking die in a ditch, you bitch.
And we did get one other question from John 12. Who's your favorite character out of these two movies?
Favorite character?
I like, out of the two movies, Chewbacca.
Yeah, I'd have to say
Chewbacca. I'd say Chewbacca or Big P and Palpatine, who is all of the Sith, in case you missed it.
Palpatine is my favorite character in most of the entire Star Wars saga, but in these two movies, I got to give it to Chewbacca.
Yeah, out of these two movies, it probably would have to be Chewbacca. One, because he's like the only character that's in both of these movies, so he has a lot more going for him on that ground. And again, like I would have liked this movie. I would have liked Rise of Skywalker a lot more had they actually like
No, did
kill,
not be killed
yeah,
too
yeah, had him killed off like that. I
Mm-hmm.
thought it would have been really gutsy. It would have made me appreciate the ambition of the movie. Whereas now it's like, yeah, it's the ninth mainline Star Wars movie. It's the third in the sequel trilogy. It's the final of the Skywalker saga, and it's just it went out with more of a whimper than a bang, like a fart in the wind.
Yeah.
So if you like this video and you want to see more, like, comment, and subscribe. We have podcasts on all the Star Wars movies now. I will link them in the description, and I will also put this in the playlist with them. And I'll start shilling those out a bit more because it's been a couple years since we did those. We will be returning for Clone Wars Season 7 with our good friend Dude What the Heck, who is just super busy right now. But we will try to do episodic podcasts on that. If not, then we'll at least do a podcast when the season wraps. So yeah, look out for those. I have some other videos in the work. Check out my quintessential breakdown on the quintessential quintuplets manga. Part 3 will be up in a
need to
few
watch
weeks.
the second video of that
Yeah.
you made.
Yeah, part 3 will be in a few weeks because I have some other stuff in the pipeline. This will probably be out after my Valentine's Day special, so go and watch that because I had a lot of fun making that. Follow me on Twitter at EAMediocrity4 and support my Patreon. And as Coop alluded, if you donate $10 or more, you will get a video commission from me. And if you donate $30 or more, you will get a fan fiction commission from me.
Or just ask a really good question.
Or just ask a really good question that I'm actually really interested in making a video on. That works too.
So that's mastery right there.
Yeah.
By the way, if you want a hint how to do that, dinosaurs. Just ask about dinosaurs, guys.
Selling all my secrets.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll see you next time.
Or hang on.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah. Sorry. And yeah, if you want to see an actually semi-decently done fan fiction, not better done fan fiction than the one that J.J. Abrams basically gave us. That's basically what this movie was. It was just fan fiction and not well done fan fiction. But anyway, check out my channel on fanfiction.net, Tide of Glory. Yeah, I do Ruby 2020. I'm probably gonna start doing some new things once I get caught up to the canon Ruby with some stuff that I'm working on there. So yeah, check that out.
And if you want to be part of writing a fan fiction, then join up with the Disky, where we can help you can help us out writing the team-based work that we've all been doing. Or if you like other team-based stuff, we can play League, which we're a lot shittier at. So fucking hop on and just lose all of the fucking matches with us, or write a already very well reviewed thing, provided it only has 4 reviews that has been put out. So yeah, basically just. Oh, and by the way, it's Coop DM on fanfiction.net in case you would like to actually read what we've already gotten through. We're through the first volume already. I only have 1 chapter left to post for that. And we are currently, it might go into a little bit of a hiatus because we got to finish up the chapter outlines for the volume 2 one. But those came along quite well when I held the first meeting. So we're going to have a few more probably, and then I will get right back to work writing it.
All right, so see you all around. Take care, and may the force be with you always.
Later.
Always.